we have started with the exception handling. Okay, so for the last session we have started with we ended with the template. So template and exception handling, what it will be having a correlation. So exception handling, where it is expected generally when you are going to have general kind of errors, or when you are going to have such kind of exceptions, because of which we are supposed to display some messages. And why we are creating a template? We are creating a template for mostly for usability, or to avoid, okay, when we are going to have with some different kinds of input for the program. So during that, it may generate some exceptions, it may generate some errors. So these templates, it will be also, as it will be a part, okay, why we'll be having with these two contents in a one unit, because most of the we'll be having one more part for this, that is a efficient way of programming. So how we can make the your programming, it will be more efficient. When you are starting with the programming, it is not expected, or when you are going for professional languages or professional development, software development, you are supposed to have with the precise code with less number of resources. Okay, so that it will be a part which it will becomes when you are going to deal with the programming. So for that purpose, template, it will be one aspect, and with that template you will be having exception handling as one of the part. If it will be still means what, if I'm creating a template to avoid the, or to reduce the line of code, and still we are getting some exceptions or some errors, so to avoid with that, we'll be having with the exception handling mechanism. So exception handling mechanism, it is, as I told, as like a template, it is not a mandatory to be included as a part of a program, but to make your programming, or to get the software to be done with the efficient manner, should have with all the possibility circumstances. Because most of the times what it will be happening when you are going to go for the get for the exception handling, there it might be chances to get a exception, and depending on that we need to display with the message. So these messages, we need to decide which messages or which kind of exception may occur in that program. So it is not mandatory for every program we need to include all kind of exception. We are going to see some default exceptions are there. So to how to get with these, or how to introduce with these exceptions in the program, that we have to see. Okay, so we start with the yesterday also we have started with the contents for this. Okay, for the exception handling. So fundamentals, as we have discussed this also, that is related with the, it is a problem that may occur during a program execution, which will be infrequently, it will be not we can say it as it should occur regularly for the program. It may occur because of some unexpected input, or it might be with some unexpected operations also. Okay, it can be resolved by allowing the program to continue with some executing with some alternative code, or it can be continued with some notifying the message. Okay, that means what, ultimate aim for introducing with the exception handling is that if some unexpected things may occur in the program, your program should not terminate unexpectedly, or it should not have any loss of data, right? Means what, whenever these exceptions may occur, yes, these exceptions we need to uh, understood, we need to identify, and we need to process for it. Okay, so for that purpose we'll be having the different blocks in which, or with which we can perform that. So this, it will be some programming related with error handling mechanism, how it will be compared with the error handling mechanism. Okay, so in the programming, errors as we can have with the, which can be identified during debugging mechanism, and we need to go for one by one error, line by line errors we need to identify, and then it will be resolved. Okay, so this, it will be aspect for error handling mechanism. So what is exception? So exception is a class. So usually it has been derived from one of the uh, parent class, system class. We are going to see that hierarchy also, from which classes we are going to take these kind of exceptions. As we have seen for file handling, we are having a iOS as it will be a parent class, and from that we are going to get with the different classes. So whatever the terms that we are going to introduce in this, C++. It will be having its properties which has been mentioned in some other parent class, and from that it has been derived. Okay, so why it has been introduced as in the form of class? Because class it will be having a more security. So why it will be having a C++ as a we can say it is main feature for your class, because it will be having a most of the security part with the private and public data members. Okay, so this it will be other aspect. Then if exception or error situation may occur, the program throws an object of that class, and if we are going to, it will maintain in the form of stack. Okay, so calling these programs or getting these objects, it will be identified with the help of catch one block. It will be there. It will be having a action on it, what kind of action we are supposed to perform. Okay, so it will be having with the three keywords. This also I think we have discussed yesterday. So it will be providing these three keywords we can handle the exception. First is a throw, that means program throws an exception, identifies a problem. We need to give that yes, this problem has occurred. Now what to do? Catch that. It will be having another block. This block it will be uh, as like accepting that yes, this exception has occurred. So at this place the we want to handle this problem. So this catch block it will be introduced, whatever the mechanism, alternative mechanism, that if this may occur I need to do that. Okay, so it is as kind of mechanism. And try block it will be identifies the block of code where you are particularly identifying the or at which place you identify the error. Okay, so how it will be done for it, or in the programming we are going to use. So it will be introduced try block with curly brackets. You will be having a try block, and in that you are going to write, or it is expected what problem may occur that we need to write, or that line of code that you are supposed to write. The next it will be having a what contains, it will be there the statements that might cause exception, then statements that it might be skipped in case of exception may occur, it might be. Okay, then to explicitly mentioned with a try block, we need to explicitly introduce with this code or line of content. Other functions because of which may occur exception may occur. Okay, so it might be having some nested functions or with some initiated code. So overall, what we can say it as the try block, it will be having a code because of which exception may occur. Okay, now you have to decide as a programmer, you need to decide that, because in this whatever the user defined. So as I told that when you are going to define an exception, it might be having with the term that is user defined also, and it might be having the term for predefined or default exceptions. So you need to decide that whether you are going to use the predefined exceptions, or you have to create your exceptions and then you are going to accept for it, okay, or you are going to catch for it. Okay. So this try block, it will be having the content line of code because of which exception may occur, right? Catch block. So this catch block, it will be immediate followed by try block. It will be having a one or more catch block. It might be there for each try block. Okay, depending on which exception type of exception you can have the catch block. Okay. So exception parameters which will be included under it, depending on that these catch blocks which will be changed, because it might be possible that for one of the exception it might be having a different kind of catch blocks. Okay, so it will be deciding the type of exception and processing for it. Alternative code that we can say it, I think another word, optional parameters that can be having some with which we can perform or we can handle these exceptions. Okay. It executes when we are going to have the parameters with a different type, which should be matched exception through in the try block. Uh, it can be we can say it as it will be some base class of thrown exception by the try block. So what is correlation that we can say it as? When the try block has been identified with the error, catch block associated for it should get with the handling mechanism. Okay, what I am saying it as means what? Let's say if I'm having with the now here we are going to see with the an example that is for divided by zero. So divided by zero, it is a part where we are having the denominator term which will be zero. So in that case, what we are expecting, if that denominator term, it will be expecting it as it is a zero. So in that case, we need to generate the exception. So it is the exception, right? So it is mathematically we cannot divide it by zero. So in that case, we need to catch that. So that is a kind of just an example that we are going to discuss that. So that's why I'm just making you aware of it. Okay. First we'll get, so this it will be a scenario for it. So we'll be having with the try block, right? So in the try block, when you are going to add with the code, right? So this it will be having a number of line of code for this try block, whatever the possibilities that you are feeling that it may cause an exception that we need to include. Then exception, after that we'll be having a catch block, exception class, exception name, in short we can say it as. If you are using some user defined exception, so that object you can instance that you can pass it here and it will be appropriate message for it, or alternative code that it might be possible. Okay, so if it will be not having any exception, so definitely it will be not going in this part. It will be just doing your all program, all whatever the code which you are running, it will be run properly. If you are not giving the any wrong input or unexpected things may occur. Okay, so if you can observe this, we'll be having with the try block, starting curly bracket, ending curly bracket, that is one block. Then catch, that is also having its own opening and closing curly brackets. So you can observe it here, we'll be having a number of catch blocks, right? Means what? For one try block, that is for one kind of exception, we can have a number of catches. Okay, that means what? For every term, let's say if I'm considering this an example for file handling, file opening is also kind of exception, file reading is also kind of exception, file writing is also kind of exception. It might be possibility, right? So these possibilities all you can handle if you are having an alternative code which is exist in the program for any kind of exception. So your programming, it can, we can say it as you have considered all the possibilities, right? So while opening and file, while closing the file, while reading, writing, for these all, it is not mandatory that it should be a part of the program, but if you are including, it is showing that you are having the good sense of programming and you have taken good care of your code, and depending on these what we can say it as catch blocks, we are going to decide that it will be having with the proper way of programming. So generally if you are doing any programming, so it is expected that you should be having with the templates need to be included as a part of it. Then try catch block, it will be a part of it programming. So when you are doing overall programming, software designing or development for it, so it is expected that you should be having with the all possibilities, because when you are giving the software for testing purpose, at that point it will be checked with all the possibilities, all the circumstances, and depending on that it should identify or it should take care that if I'm giving some wrong input, still it should show some response for me. That means what? Your system, it should be more interactive. To make this thing, we'll be having this uh, exception handling mechanism with which we are going to show with. Now what we will be having in this catch block, it will be a one alternative code with which we are going to, so what it will be alternative code for this divided by zero. So we have to display with the message that yes, we are dividing it by zero or whatever it might be, it will be not possible, so I'm terminating the program properly. So what is expected, what is the flow for it? When we are identified with the error here or exception term here, it will goes for exception, what type of exception it will be. It will go appropriate for that. It will be perform this operation and it will be terminate the program properly, right? So if I'm doing it without any try catch block, what it may occur, your program may goes to infinite loop or it may goes for any kind of unexpected termination of the program. So this unexpected termination means what? you might be having some loss of data. Okay, it might be having with some uh, compiler files, it might be having with some issues, or afterwards when you are going to recompile that program or re-execute that program, it may generate some other kind of errors or exceptions. So better way, it is expected that when you are going to have with these such kind of programs, possibility of exceptions, try to include these exceptions as a part of a program. You might have observed few predefined exceptions also. Okay, it is not mandatory that every time we need to get with the or you need to write that script, but default compiler also it will having its own mechanism to catch such kind of exception or identify such kind of exceptions. Okay, so related with the file handling, already as I told that when you are uh, if you are remembering, we have done with the code that is file is open. So what that it is also kind of checking with the exception that yes, I can open the file or not. So you might be writing that part, or the file handling also we are checking with if else. If that file is open, we can perform the operation. Otherwise, we are unable to open the file. That is also kind of exception handling mechanism. Okay. Now throwing an exception. So now throwing an exception, it is used with the keyword throw. Okay, so we are focused more about the try and catch block. Now we are talking about the throw. So throw followed by operands will be having with, which will be representing with the different type of exceptions. So the throw operand can be of any type. Okay, it can have with the objects, it can have called as, or we can say it as generally, it will be a object for, or which will be referred as exception object. Okay, in the bracket, if you can observe that, we'll be having a different kind of exception catching mechanism, right? Exception classes. So to that, we'll be having the object, or it will be working as in the form of object file, right? So this throw operand, which will be initializes the exception parameters with the matching catch block, catch handler. If it has been found, then we can say it as we have handled proper exception. Right now, it might be possible that if I'm having with the try catch block and that exception type, if I'm not considering, it just I'm introducing the exception, but it will be not matching with my proper try block. So it is also not of use. In that case, we are not handling that exceptions properly. Okay. Now after this, we are going to see with one example for this try catch block. Okay, and then we'll discuss with this when to use this exception handling mechanism or what it will be done for. Okay. So we have discussed with this try block, catch block, and throw block. Okay. Now we'll go for the example which it is expected as a part of your programming. That is divided by 0 section. Getting with this file, notepad file, I'll just share that file. Just wait for a moment. This it will be a one of the try catch block example for divided by 0. So specifically this, it will be example for it will be a problem statements also. Okay. So where we will be having with the first one of the function which will be having with the, we are going to write the definition. So it is a simple part where I'm not using any class or anything. It will be having with the definition division with the two parameters which will be required for it, a and b. Considering it as a, it will be as part of my numerator and denominator. So when you are having it as term b, it will be a 0. It is a kind of exception. So there you are going to have a throw keyword with a division. So one statement it will be having that you are identified that error or exception specific term. So that exception condition and If it will be not the divided by 0, it will be doing with the operation, actual operation of division, and return with the value. Okay, so every time it is, we are not expected that okay, it should generate the exception. Depending on the input which you are providing, it should generate the exception. Okay, if it will be not having any part of it, it will be terminate the program properly. So the main will be having with the static variables, we are taking it as a 50 and 5 variable as a 0, which we are going to take it as in the form of, right? So A, and this it will be in the form of B, right? So value of A, it will be a 50 and it will be 0. So which we have passed it to function, right? So end result that we are going to take it in the form of variable set. So in the try block, what you are going to write? So in the try block, if you can observe, we are going to perform with the call for the function. Okay, you can write it here definition also. It is not like that you have to write definition outside for it. So in the instead of avoiding the much part of the main. So what is the again when you are talking about the efficient way of programming, you need to have a main function which will be more uh, uh, clear. Okay, means what? Should not having the in the main function much complexity. Try to avoid the more code or less code in the main function and write it outside the main, so that you can make all function calls in the main, and outside that main you'll be having it. It is as like a index program for your file. Okay, whenever you are doing with the software handling or software programming, you need to have the main as your index file, and through which you are going to have it all function call. Okay, so here we are done with the function call. That means what it should go for definition. It should get with that statement as it is identified. Here we are taken it as a static variable, so it is identified with that. It should display with that throw exception, and in the catch block, right? So if you can observe that we are going to take it as in the form of some character values. Also, it is a kind of message that we are going to display as in the form of string form. So here we are taken that we are not writing any what we can say it as alternative code. We are just displaying the message, right? So it is in the form of character message that yes, you are dividing it by 0. That message it will be displayed, right? So in the form of C error, right? Or we can use with the cout statement also. So error message or cout statement you can do as in the form of regular message. It will be displayed. So this it will be a block for catch. Right. So we'll try to get the output for this. What it will be. So part which you have given it. Right. So it will be identified with the divided by 0 condition. So now here let's say if I'll change it for this, let's say for 4, if I'll change the value of y as in the static variable, right? So it will be identifying with the actual value which is as the output for it. Okay, so it is not expected that as we are including a try catch block, that means what definitely this it will be occurring for it exception turn. But if depending on the input that you are providing, if that is it has been identifying with that exception or error term, so in that case only we need to display with the message. Otherwise this it will be a part of your program which it will be executed when only exception may occur. Every time it is not mandatory that we need to go for this. If it will be having that condition, if divided by 0 denominator term is 0, then only it should go for this mechanism. Otherwise, whatever the normal program it will be having, it will take with these all parameters and it should display the output. That is a expected, right? So that is the difference, or that is the what we can say it as part which with we can say it as exception handling mechanism. It will be more advantageous feature for C++ programming. As I told, it is also part of your further programming, that is Java and other programs also. So where we will be having a more flexibility that you can get from it by doing such kind of exception handling mechanism. Okay. So when you are going to deal with this, it will be having with the more kind of exceptions, different kind of exceptions that may occur. Okay, so this we are seeing it for only to display us with the simple. Now we are going to see with a few examples where we will be having with the uh, some predefined exceptions. So as I told that there it will be some predefined exceptions that it will be specifically reserved for specific purpose. Okay. Or otherwise you can have a user defined exceptions. You can create your own exception. Okay. So first of all that we'll see with some background for it. So when to use with the exception handling mechanism. So we are going to have the process synchronous error. Okay, when we are having with the synchronous system, which will be generating any kind of unexpected things, but it is having with some correlation where we'll be having with some function calls, methods. So at that time, we need to use with this, not for a synchronous system where we'll be having with independent programs which will be not having any correlation. Generally, in the software system, if I'm going to have with the now here we are seeing with the small programs which has been defined for you. Problem statement has been given and you are writing a code, that is enough. But when you are dealing with the software system, development system, so there you need to have a different synchronous system correlation with one program with another. Synchronous means what? That it will be having some link between one program and another. So in that case, we need to see with that kind of programming. For that, definitely exception handling will be a suitable way for identifying the exception. Another is to process the problems which are arising in some predefined software, as I said, which will be having with some elements, such predefined functions, or these handling mechanism, exception handling mechanism can have your application with some more flexibility. Okay, depending on the application need, that is obvious, because without that we cannot have with the uh, depending on the application need, we are going to introduce this. Okay, so it is not as I said, mandatory to introduce exception handling for every program. Depending on type of application, we are going to introduce exceptions. Okay. There is one more term that is we are going to see that with the predefined exceptions also. That is a rethrowing an exception. That means what? Repeatedly when some kind of exceptions or uh, there is possibility it may occur. So in that case, when we are going to use a catch handler, okay, that is a cannot have uh, only with some particular process or exception. Okay, it will be expected with some next try block. Means what? Directly as like if I'm saying it as if else condition. If this condition may occur, then we are going to have with the, or at least we need to have with the throw statement. With that we can include with the, but generally try and catch block, it will be working with simultaneously. We cannot have only handling with the exception. We need to have mechanism through which we can throw the exception. Okay, directly we cannot have with the catch block. It's like the each statement else directly cannot work, right? So if it can have, that means what? If this condition occur, if you are not writing else statement, still it will work. That means what? Your program will terminate by default. But let's say if you are writing just only else statement, if you are not writing if part, then your program will not execute like that, which will be having with the try block. But if you are uh, just including with the catch block without try, it should not work for it. Okay, so, but generally it will be having with both the blocks. It will be having with the rethrowing an exception when you are going to have with the for one exception handling mechanism we need to handle for it. Okay. So when it is expected, we need to have it this. We need to perform the different handling mechanism or different predefined exception handling mechanism. Okay. So what it will be referred with this code, that is when you are going to have a, let's say, example for exception with a number of exceptions will be right. So it might be possible this through it will work with re-execution. So whenever some function it will be there, right? So as here we are just having the message as divided by 0 in the throw block. So instead of that, it might be having with some exception type of A, exception B, exception C. It might be possible for one, let's say as I told, one function. Let's say if I'm considering it as a for like a, which will be having with the function for file handling, let's say only. So where we'll be having with the file open. So what is expected with the file open? It should have the operation for opening the file, and before that it should have a creating the file. Right? If you are remembering, file open, what message it will use, that it should create the file if it is not created, and it should open that file after creation. So it will be having the two parts in it. It should identify with that, right? So with creating. So if it will be having while creation, if it is having any exception, it kind of one exception that need to be thrown. And if it will be while opening, if it will be having with some kind of exception, again it should have with that exception separately. It is related with only one operation, that is open. While I am opening a file, I may get with the exception for these two. While creating, there is a problem, or while opening, there it might be a problem, right? So there it will be expected with these kind of exceptions. As an example, just I have told, depending on that exception, objects will be passed, and these objects, so it will be having with the less than 1 minute. If it is disconnected, you can rejoin. They will be continuing with the session.